Dinner with friends is supposed to be fun, right? A break from the monotony, a chance to laugh and unwind. But tonight, it feels like I'm trapped in a social minefield. As I sip my wine and listen to the chatter around me, I steal a glance at Mark. He's in his element, holding court with a story about some stock market triumph. His laughter booms, filling the room. Then it happens. A seemingly harmless discussion about politics turns into a verbal slap in the face. You don't know what you're talking about, Lisa. Mark snaps, his tone dismissive. Maybe stick to something you actually understand. The heat of humiliation rushes to my cheeks, my stomach twisting into knots. My friends fall silent, their eyes darting away, trying to pretend they didn't hear. I force a smile, but inside I'm seething. How dare he belittle me like that? I look up, and there it is. Alex's gaze, intense and unwavering. Unlike the others, he doesn't look away. His eyes hold mine, and for a moment, the humiliation is replaced by something else, something I can't quite name. Unease, curiosity, maybe even a flicker of intrigue. The rest of the evening drags on, my mind swirling with anger and embarrassment. When we finally get home, Mark crashes into bed without a word. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. And then my phone buzzes. A text message after midnight. I unlock my phone and see it's from Alex. You deserve better. Such a simple message, but it hits me like a ton of bricks. I stare at the words, my heart pounding. Better than what? Better than this. I try to shake off the feeling, but the seed of doubt is firmly planted. A week later, we're at a barbecue. I've put on a new dress, hoping to feel a bit more like myself. As I move through the crowd, Alex finds me. He corners me near the drinks table, his eyes lingering a bit too long on my dress. You look stunning, he says, his voice low. That dress really brings out the sparkle in your eyes. His compliment feels like a balm to my wounded pride. I laugh it off, but inside I'm flattered. It's been so long since anyone noticed me like that, especially Mark. Later, a casual comment from Mark about some hidden gambling debt spirals into a full-blown argument. I storm out, needing air, needing space. My phone buzzes again. Alex. This time, I don't hesitate. I text back, and before I know it, I'm pouring my heart out to him. His understanding is like a lifeline, and I cling to it desperately. Days pass, and we're playing charades at another gathering. It's all light-hearted fun until Alex's hand brushes against mine. The touch is innocent enough, but it sends a jolt through me. I look at him, and his expression mirrors mine, surprised, confused, intrigued. Then comes the invitation. A casual coffee to discuss my troubles with Mark, he says. I hesitate, but the allure of his attention is too tempting to resist. Maybe I just need someone to talk to, someone who actually listens. As I sit there, coffee cup in hand, I wonder how I got here. How did a single moment of disrespect unravel so much? And where does this road lead? The spark has been lit, and there's no telling how it will burn. I didn't expect the cafe to be so dimly lit. It feels like we're in our own little world, a secret hideaway. As I sit across from Alex, the low hum of conversation around us fades into the background. He's leaning forward, his eyes locked on mine, listening intently as I vent my frustrations about Mark. His empathy is palpable, a stark contrast to the dismissiveness I've grown used to. It's just, I don't feel seen, I say, my voice trembling. Mark barely acknowledges me anymore, let alone appreciates me. Alex nods, his expression serious. You deserve to be seen, Lisa. You deserve so much more. His words are like a lifeline, pulling me from the depths of my self-doubt. We talk for hours, about everything and nothing. I find out we both love classic films, Hitchcock, Wilder, the whole shebang. He promises to send me a list of his favorites. It's a small gesture, but it feels oddly romantic, like he's inviting me into his world. Our texts escalate into late-night conversations. It starts with casual banter but quickly deepens into laughter and shared vulnerabilities. The line between friendship and something more begins to blur, and I can't help but wonder where this is going. At a group dinner, I catch Alex staring at me from across the table. The intensity of his gaze makes my heart race. I try to focus on the conversation around me, but I can feel his eyes burning into me. It's thrilling and terrifying all at once. And then there's the accidental brush. We're at another gathering, and Alex reaches for a bottle of wine just as I do. His hand, accidentally, bumps into mine, and the contact feels electric. It's a fleeting moment, but it ignites something forbidden, a desire I can't ignore. After too many glasses of wine, Alex pulls me aside. His eyes are glassy, his words slurred. Lisa, I've always found you attractive, he confesses, his voice raw and honest. You're amazing, and Mark's a fool for not seeing it. His confession fans the flames of temptation. I should walk away, I know that. But his words, his presence, they're like a drug, and I'm already addicted. The drive home is a blur. My mind is racing, my heart pounding. Alex is driving, and as we pull up to a stoplight, he turns to me. The streetlights cast a soft glow on his face, and before I know it, he's leaning in. Our lips meet, and it's like a spark igniting a bonfire. The kiss is passionate, intoxicating, leaving me breathless and wanting more. I pull away, my mind spinning. We shouldn't be doing this, I whisper, but my voice lacks conviction. Alex smiles, a mix of guilt and desire in his eyes. I know, but it feels right, doesn't it? I nod, unable to deny the truth. The spark has turned into a raging fire, and there's no going back. The temptation is too strong, and as I sit there, breathless and conflicted, I realize that this is only the beginning. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to sneak around, living a double life. Yet here I am, heart pounding in my chest as I slide into the back seat of Alex's car. The secluded park is our secret haven, a place where the rest of the world fades away. As Alex pulls me close, the thrill of secrecy intensifies our passion. His kisses are urgent, filled with a hunger that matches my own. Each stolen moment with Alex is a heady mix of excitement and fear. But afterward, as I drive home, the pangs of guilt creep in. I catch glimpses of Mark through the window, busying himself with some mundane task, oblivious to my betrayal. The remorse is there, gnawing at the edges of my conscience, but the excitement of the affair outweighs it. I tell myself it's just a fling, a way to feel alive again. But deep down, I know it's more than that. Alex showers me with intimate gifts. A vintage scarf that feels like silk against my skin, a rare book by my favorite author, a handwritten poem that makes my heart ache with its beauty. Each gift feels like a token of his affection, a reminder that he sees me, really sees me, in a way Mark hasn't for years. Living this double life is a balancing act. I juggle my roles as a wife and a mistress, carefully maintaining the facade of a happy marriage. I laugh at Mark's jokes, make his favorite meals, all the while my mind is elsewhere, consumed by thoughts of Alex. It's exhausting, exhilarating, and utterly unsustainable. Then comes the close call. We're at a hotel, wrapped in each other's arms, when I hear Mark's voice in the hallway. My blood runs cold, we scramble to dress, and I barely manage to slip out of the room unnoticed. The near miss fuels the danger and excitement of our affair, but it also terrifies me. One wrong move, and my world could come crashing down. Despite the risks, my bond with Alex deepens. We share our deepest fears and dreams, our connection growing stronger with each secret rendezvous. It's not just lust anymore, it's something more profound, something I can't quite put into words. He makes me feel seen, heard, cherished. We escape to a charming bed and breakfast for a weekend of uninterrupted passion. The experience feels like a dream. We walk through quaint streets, hand in hand, stealing kisses when no one's looking. At night, we lose ourselves in each other, our bodies intertwined, our hearts beating in sync. For those few precious days, it's like we're the only two people in the world. As I lay in his arms, the reality of our situation looms over me. How long can we keep this up? What will happen when the truth comes out? The questions swirl in my mind, but for now, I push them aside. All that matters is this moment, this fleeting, fragile happiness. The affair has begun, and there's no turning back. Each secret rendezvous, each intimate gift, each whispered confession binds me closer to Alex. The spark that started it all has ignited into a blazing inferno, and I'm powerless to stop it. Late nights and weekend errands. They've become my go-to excuses, but they're starting to wear thin. Mark's been asking questions, his brow furrowed with suspicion. "Where were you?" he asks, not even trying to hide the edge in his voice. "Oh, just running some errands," I reply, avoiding his eyes. I can feel the weight of his gaze, the unspoken doubt hanging in the air. My stomach churns with guilt and fear. How long can I keep this up before the whole charade collapses? The guilt is a constant companion, gnawing at me, creating an emotional chasm between us. Conversations with Mark are strained and superficial, filled with awkward silences and forced smiles. I can't remember the last time we had a genuine laugh together, and it's tearing me apart inside. I'm betraying him, and it's killing me. But I can't seem to stop. Mark's suspicion grows with each passing day. I catch him glancing at my phone, his eyes narrowing whenever a notification pops up. He's started monitoring my calls and texts, asking who I'm talking to, where I'm going. I brush him off with vague answers, but it's clear he's not buying it. The tension between us is palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Then I do the unthinkable. I forget our wedding anniversary. It's a painful reminder of how far I've strayed from my vows, how tangled I've become in this web of deceit. Mark's face, when he realizes I've forgotten, is a picture of hurt and disbelief. "How could you forget?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mark," I stammer, but the words sound hollow, even to me. The look in his eyes cuts deeper than any argument ever could. And then there's Alex. Our once passionate trysts are now tainted by tension and resentment. He's frustrated with my inability to leave Mark, and it shows. "How much longer are we going to keep doing this, Lisa?" he demands, his tone sharp. "I can't keep being your secret." "I don't know," I whisper, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm trying, Alex. It's just complicated." He shakes his head, anger and hurt flickering in his eyes. "It's not fair to either of us," he says. "You need to make a choice." The ultimatum hangs in the air, heavy and suffocating. Choose between him and Mark. The thought paralyzes me with fear and uncertainty. I'm standing at a crossroads, and no matter which path I take, someone's going to get hurt, including me. As I sit in the darkness of our living room, the weight of my decisions crashing down on me, I realize there's no easy way out. The cracks in the facade are widening, and it's only a matter of time before everything comes crumbling down. The question is, who will I be when the dust settles? The text message was like a punch to the gut. I wasn't snooping, honestly. Mark left his phone on the kitchen counter, and the screen lit up with a message from some woman named Kimberly. It was suggestive, to say the least. My heart stopped, then pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Betrayal, bitter and sharp, washed over me, mingled with a sick sense of irony. So, Mark wasn't the devoted husband he pretended to be. Suddenly, my guilt evaporated, replaced by a burning desire for revenge. I could feel a twisted idea taking root in my mind. If Mark could betray me, I'd make him suffer. And I knew just how to do it. Alex would be my pawn, the catalyst in my plan. But it wouldn't stop there. Mark's friends, his precious circle of confidence, they were my targets. I'd use them, twist them, and watch Mark's world crumble. First, there was Ben. Flirtatious, always giving me those lingering looks when he thought no one was watching. It was almost too easy. I started by playing into his flirtations, giving him the attention he craved. One night, while Mark was conveniently out, I invited Ben over under the guise of needing help with a broken appliance. The seduction was swift. Ben's weakness for me was as predictable as it was pathetic. Our encounter was passionate, primal, and over far too quickly. As he lay there, catching his breath, I began to drop subtle hints about my dissatisfaction with Mark. I painted a picture of a neglected wife, seeking solace. The seeds of doubt were planted, and I knew they would grow. Next was David. Quiet, handsome, and easy to manipulate. I orchestrated a situation where we ended up alone at a mutual friend's party. A few whispered words, a light touch, and he was putty in my hands. The kiss we shared was stolen, forbidden, and it left him wanting more. Perfect. With each calculated move, I became a master manipulator, weaving a web of lies and seduction. I isolated Mark from his friends, one by one, watching the confusion and hurt play out on his face. It was a sick sort of satisfaction, seeing the cracks form in his perfect little world. Revenge became my addiction. Each conquest gave me a surge of power and control, a twisted sense of justice for the wrongs he'd done to me. I was no longer the meek, neglected wife. I was the puppeteer, pulling the strings, watching the chaos unfold. But as the darkness of my actions began to close in, a nagging thought gnawed at the edges of my mind. What was I becoming? How far was too far? With each step I took down this path, I felt myself slipping further away from the person I once was. In the end, revenge had consumed me, transformed me. I had become someone else, someone unrecognizable. And as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I couldn't help but wonder, was it all worth it? Or had I lost myself in the process? The seed of revenge had grown into a monstrous, all-consuming force. And there was no turning back. I didn't expect the photo to have such an explosive effect. A simple picture, just a kiss between Alex and me, sent anonymously to Mark. It was like dropping a lit match into a pool of gasoline. The seed of suspicion took root immediately, twisting his trust into paranoia. Mark's transformation was swift. He became increasingly paranoid and accusatory, lashing out at anyone who got too close. His trust in his friends eroded rapidly, replaced by a festering suspicion. He'd glance at his phone, his brow furrowing with every notification, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for hidden threats. A casual gathering was all it took for everything to come to a head. The guys were over for drinks, just a typical night, until Mark cornered Alex. I watched from the kitchen, my heart pounding. Mark's voice was low and dangerous, demanding answers about the photo. Alex, clueless, tried to deflect, but Mark was relentless. And then it happened, a drunken brawl. Fists flew, furniture toppled, and shouts echoed through the house. I stood there, frozen, as the chaos unfolded. Mark and Alex, once inseparable, were tearing each other apart. The friendship shattered right before my eyes, leaving Mark isolated and betrayed. The aftermath was brutal. Mark and I engaged in bitter arguments, our words laced with venom. Suspicion and resentment fueled our fights, the love we once had buried under layers of anger and hurt. Our marriage hung by a thread, and every argument felt like it could be the last. But the worst was yet to come. Mark discovered my affair with Ben, and the revelation shattered the last remnants of his trust. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, utter devastation mixed with a burning rage. The illusion of our relationship was completely obliterated, and there was no turning back. In the final confrontation, everything came tumbling out. I confessed to my affairs with all of his friends, the truth exploding like a bomb. Mark's face twisted with pain and betrayal, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. He was utterly devastated, and I could see the man I once loved breaking right in front of me. Why, Lisa? He choked out, his voice raw with emotion. Why did you do this to me? I couldn't find the words to explain the tangled mess of emotions and motivations that led me here. Revenge, hurt, desperation, they all swirled together in a toxic cocktail. I looked at him, tears streaming down my face, and whispered, I don't know. But deep down, I did know. I wanted him to feel the same pain I had felt, to see the world crumble around him as mine had. The seed of revenge had grown into a monstrous force, consuming everything in its path. And now, standing amidst the wreckage of our lives, I realized the true cost of my actions. The house was silent, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. Mark turned away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him walk away, feeling a hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. The truth had been unveiled, and there was no escaping the consequences. In the end, revenge had destroyed us both. And as I stood there, alone and broken, I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. The knock on the door was sharp and deliberate, pulling me out of my daze. I opened it to find Mark standing there, a grim look on his face. He handed me a manila envelope, his eyes cold and distant. I didn't need to open it to know what it was, divorce papers. Sign them, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. As he walked away, a mix of relief and emptiness washed over me. Our marriage was officially over. The sense of finality was both liberating and devastating. I closed the door, leaning against it, feeling the weight of my choices pressing down on me. The fallout from my actions was swift and brutal. Mark's once tight-knit group of friends was shattered beyond repair. They blamed each other, their friendships tainted by suspicion and betrayal. The laughter and camaraderie that once filled our gatherings were replaced by silence and bitterness. I had succeeded in my twisted plan, but the victory felt hollow. Despite achieving my revenge, I couldn't escape the lingering guilt. The faces of those I had hurt haunted me, their pain a constant reminder of the damage I'd caused. Each night, I lay awake, my mind replaying the events over and over. The thrill of revenge had turned into a relentless nightmare. Emotionally, I was a wreck. The roller coaster of the affair, the fights, the revelations, it had all taken its toll. I felt drained, empty, like a shell of the person I once was. The woman who craved attention and excitement had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. To make matters worse, Alex and my other lovers began to distance themselves from me. The men I had used in my quest for revenge were disgusted by my manipulative actions. Alex, once my confidant and partner in secrecy, looked at me with a mixture of pity and revulsion. I had alienated everyone who mattered, leaving me truly alone. As the days turned into weeks, the taste of revenge turned to ashes in my mouth. The bitter end was nothing like I had imagined. I was left to face the consequences of my destructive choices, my life in ruins. The person I had become was a stranger, driven by anger and hurt, and now I had nothing to show for it but regret. Sitting alone in our empty house, I couldn't help but wonder how it had come to this. How had I let my anger and jealousy consume me to the point of destroying everything I held dear? The silence was deafening, the emptiness suffocating. I had wanted revenge, but the cost had been too high. In the end, I was left with nothing but the echoes of my own mistakes. The divorce papers lay on the table, a stark reminder of the life I had destroyed. And as I signed my name, Sealing the end of our marriage, I realized that the true punishment for my actions was living with the aftermath. The seed of revenge had grown into a monstrous force, consuming everything in its path. And now, standing amidst the wreckage of my life, I had to face the harsh reality that some wounds never heal and some choices can never be undone. The silence was unbearable. I had to confront Alex, to seek some form of closure. Maybe then I could start to piece together the shattered remnants of my life. With a mix of trepidation and desperation, I made my way to his apartment, hoping for understanding, forgiveness, anything but the void of isolation I'd been living in. When he opened the door, his expression was cold and distant, a far cry from the warmth that once defined our relationship. "What do you want, Lisa?" he asked, his voice devoid of the affection it once held. "I needed to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling. I needed to explain, to apologize. He stepped aside, allowing me in, but the space between us felt like a chasm. I sat on his couch, the memories of our passionate encounters now tainted by the icy distance between us. "You've got 10 minutes, he said, crossing his arms and leaning against the wall. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I never meant to hurt you, Alex. I got lost in my anger, my need for revenge. I wasn't thinking clearly." Alex's eyes flashed with anger. "You think that excuse is what you did? You used me, Lisa. You used all of us. You shattered my trust, not just in you, but in everyone. I don't know if I can ever trust anyone again." His words cut deep, each one a painful truth I couldn't deny. I had destroyed more than just my marriage. I had shattered the foundation of trust in every relationship I touched. "I know I've hurt you, and I can't take that back," I whispered. "But I think I loved you, Alex. Maybe I still do." My desire for revenge blinded me to what we had. He shook his head, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "Too little, too late, Lisa. You threw away what we had for some twisted sense of justice. And now you're reaping what you've sown." As I left his apartment, the weight of his words pressed down on me. The painful truth was that my actions had far-reaching consequences, more devastating than I had ever imagined. News of my betrayal spread like wildfire through our social circle. I became a pariah, shunned by former friends and acquaintances. Invitations dried up, phone calls went unanswered. I was the subject of hushed whispers and pointed looks, my reputation in tatters. The isolation was suffocating. The divorce hit me hard financially. Mark had been the primary breadwinner, and without his income, I struggled to make ends meet. I was forced to sell our shared home, downsizing to a small, hollow apartment. The once comfortable lifestyle I took for granted was gone, replaced by a stark reality that left me feeling vulnerable and exposed. Utterly alone, I grappled with the consequences of my choices. The walls of my apartment echoed with silence, a constant reminder of my self-inflicted isolation. I knew I needed help, guidance to navigate this self-destructive path I had walked down. Desperate, I began attending therapy sessions. My therapist, a calm and patient woman named Dr. Harper, helped me peel back the layers of my behavior. Each session was a painful excavation of my past, my motivations, my fears. "Why did you feel the need to seek revenge?" Dr. Harper asked gently during one session. I stared at the ceiling, the tears flowing freely. "Because I felt invisible, unappreciated. I wanted to hurt Mark the way he hurt me. But I didn't see the damage I was doing to myself and everyone around me." She nodded, taking notes. "It's important to understand that those feelings are valid, but the actions you took were harmful. Healing will take time, and it will require you to confront those feelings and find healthier ways to address them." Each session was a step towards understanding, towards forgiveness, not just of others, but of myself. The road to redemption was long and arduous, but it was a journey I needed to take. In the quiet of my apartment, I began to reflect on the person I had become and the person I wanted to be. The taste of revenge had turned to ashes, but from those ashes, I hoped to rise, stronger and wiser. The reckoning had come, and it was up to me to rebuild my life, piece by painful piece. The morning light filtered through the curtains of my small apartment, casting a soft glow on the walls. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar weight of regret pressing down on me. It was another day, another chance to piece my life back together. Therapy had become a lifeline, guiding me through the murky waters of my emotions. Dr. Harper's office was a safe haven, a place where I could confront the deep-seated insecurities that had driven me to seek validation through infidelity. "Why did you need revenge so badly?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. "Because I felt invisible," I replied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Mark made me feel small, unimportant. I wanted him to hurt the way I did, but I took it too far. Way too far." She nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "It's important to recognize that feeling, but also to understand that your actions were destructive. Healing starts with accepting responsibility." Accepting responsibility. Those words echoed in my mind long after the session ended. I knew what I had to do next. The thought of facing Mark and his friends, acknowledging the pain I inflicted, filled me with dread. But it was necessary. I spent days writing heartfelt letters of apology, pouring my soul into each one. I addressed Mark first, laying bare my remorse and the depths of my regret. "I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you, for shattering the trust and love we once shared. My actions were driven by my own insecurities and anger, and I take full responsibility for that." Next were the letters to his friends, each one a painful confession of my manipulative actions. Some responded with anger and rejection, their words cutting deep. But a few, surprisingly, offered tentative forgiveness. "I appreciate your effort to change," one of them wrote. "It doesn't erase the past, but it's a start." Rebuilding trust was a slow and arduous process. Those who were willing to give me a second chance approached cautiously, their skepticism evident. I couldn't blame them, but I was determined to show that I was committed to change, that the woman who sought revenge was gone, replaced by someone striving for redemption. Focusing on my career became a form of therapy. I threw myself into my work, rediscovering the passion that had once driven me. Each small success felt like a step towards reclaiming my identity. I achieved professional milestones I'd once thought out of reach, each one a testament to my newfound independence. The healing process was anything but linear. Some days, the weight of my past felt insurmountable, the guilt and regret threatening to pull me under. But with each step forward, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The support of my therapist, the tentative forgiveness of a few friends, and my own growing sense of self-worth fueled my journey. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, a letter from Mark arrived. My hands trembled as I opened it, bracing myself for more anger. Instead, I found a surprisingly compassionate message. "I see that you're trying to change," he wrote. "It doesn't make what happened okay, but it does mean something. I hope you find peace." Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. It was a small step, but it meant the world. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but learning from it, growing beyond it. The long road to redemption stretched out before me, challenging and uncertain, but I was ready to face it. As I looked out at the city skyline, a sense of hope blossomed within me. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I believed I could make it. One step at a time, one day at a time, I was finding my way back to myself. The scent of freshly brewed coffee hit me as I stepped into the cafe, the comforting aroma wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I was looking forward to a quiet moment with my thoughts, a break from the whirlwind of therapy sessions and self-reflection. But then I saw him, Mark. He was standing in line, his back to me, unaware of my presence. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of anxiety and curiosity churning in my stomach. Should I leave before he noticed me, or face the awkwardness head on? Before I could decide, he turned around, and our eyes met. The surprise on his face mirrored my own. There was no escaping now. I forced a smile and walked over, trying to keep my nerves in check. Mark, hi, I said, my voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. Lisa, he replied, his tone equally cautious. Fancy seeing you here. The awkwardness was palpable, a heavy cloud hanging over our heads. But to my surprise, we managed to have a civil conversation. We talked about the weather, our jobs, anything to avoid the elephant in the room. Just as I was about to suggest we part ways, Mark took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, his voice steady. About us, about everything that happened. And I realized that I wasn't a perfect husband. I know I made you feel invisible, and for that, I'm truly sorry. His apology caught me off guard. I had been so consumed by my own guilt and remorse that I hadn't considered that Mark might have his own regrets. The weight of his words lifted a burden I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Thank you, Mark, I said, my voice soft. I'm sorry, too, for everything. The conversation provided a sense of closure I hadn't expected. We talked a bit more, this time with a genuine sense of understanding and forgiveness. By the time we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of peace, as if a chapter of my life had finally been properly closed. A few weeks later, I met someone new. His name was James, a kind and compassionate man who saw me for who I was, flaws and all. Our first encounter was at a bookstore, where we bonded over a shared love of classic literature. There was a spark of hope, a possibility of something beautiful. Cautiously, I embraced the chance of a new relationship. James and I took things slowly, building our connection on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. Every step forward was a reminder of the lessons I had learned. I vowed never to repeat the destructive patterns that had led to my downfall. Through this new journey, I learned to forgive myself for my past mistakes. Recognizing that I was capable of change and growth was empowering. I no longer saw myself as the woman who had sought revenge, but as someone who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I embraced the uncertainty of the future with newfound optimism. The road ahead was still unknown, but I was ready to create a life filled with joy and authenticity. Finding redemption wasn't about erasing my past, it was about acknowledging my mistakes and committing to personal growth and self-improvement. Each day was a step towards becoming the person I wanted to be. With the lessons of the past firmly in mind and a heart open to new possibilities, I was ready to move forward. This was my new beginning, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the kids were finally in bed and asleep, and the living room was way too quiet. I know I should probably read a book or tackle that pile of laundry, but I found myself opening that dumb social media app instead. I hadn't even used it in months, but after one too many glasses of wine, mindless scrolling starts to feel like a genius idea. His face popped up and my finger moved before I could even think twice. He was Mark's buddy from college, the funny one who used to have me in stitches. I remember he always had some goofy anecdote to make those boring dinner parties bearable. Haha. I commented on some ridiculous meme he posted about cats. Stupid, but harmless, right? He messaged back within minutes. Long time no see. The banter was just like old times. We messaged back and forth for hours, him catching up on my life, me telling him about work and the kids. It felt like the old days, and with Mark snoring on the couch next to me, the rush of his attention was surprisingly addictive. He must have felt it too, because the next day the messages started early. I don't even want to admit how fast I check my phone at work, because who knows if he'd messaged back. I started sneaking glances at his profile, checking out his pictures. He had a new job, some fancy big city title, and the beginnings of a very adult-looking belly, which was oddly endearing. But those eyes, that goofy grin, he hadn't changed that much. Meanwhile, I'm over here changing diapers and reheating chicken nuggets. Pathetic. A ping on my phone startled me, like what you see. The message was from him, a smirk practically oozing through the screen. My heart pounded. I was definitely in over my head. Better watch yourself. I tried to play it cool. But the second I hit send, I regretted it. Too bold? Would he think I was into it? Turns out, the answer was yes. Our messages went from catching up to flirty and funny, a game of pushing boundaries and trying to see who would back down first. The thing is, neither of us did. His messages were a lifeline, a break from the ordinary mess of my everyday routine. And the fact that it was so wrong, so secret, that's what made it thrilling. We even moved the conversation to that green messaging app. It felt so official, like this was something real, a little world that was just for us. We started staying up late, typing on my couch while Mark breathed heavily beside me. I'd never admitted to my best friend, but I kind of liked Mark's snoring, meant I could keep doing what I was doing without raising any alarms. It was messed up, I know. It's like he was reading my mind. The next day, out of nowhere, he asks, "So, when can I see this gorgeous face in person?" My stomach flipped. I knew this was a whole different level. Pictures were fun, but in person? That was real. The rational part of me, which was getting smaller by the second, reminded me that this was Mark's friend. The guy I'd made small talk with over dried chicken at a dozen potlucks. Mark probably even babysat him back when they were in college. And that image, well, let's just say it wasn't helping me stay in my lane. But then he'd send a flirty message, and the guilt would fade. It's like this switch inside me flicked off. Suddenly, it was all about the thrill, about feeling like something exciting could still happen in my life. I typed back, maybe I could sneak away for a coffee sometime. He sent a winky face emoji, and that was that. I was done for. A few days later, I sent a picture to my best friend, a black dress with heels I hadn't worn in ages. Girls' night was all I said. Hot mama. She messaged back with a hard eyes emoji. If only she knew. He suggested a bar downtown, a place I'd never been but sounded just fancy enough to feel daring. Mark was out of town on a golf trip or something, so the coast was clear. Well, as clear as it could be when I hadn't told a soul about this. Seeing him in person was a shock. Sure, the pictures were accurate, but there was a spark in his eyes that didn't come through on the screen. We talked like we'd seen each other yesterday, not 10 years ago. The drinks flowed, and my anxieties seemed to melt away. That is, until our hands accidentally brushed as we reached for the popcorn. We both jerked like we'd been electrocuted. I could feel my cheeks burning, and I'm sure I stammered some stupid excuse. But his eyes, he looked at me with this hunger, this unspoken intensity that made my breath catch. The rest of the night was a blur. Did we touch again? I can't remember. All I know is I got home way past midnight, a sick mixture of desire and terror swirling in my gut. I thought meeting him once would be enough. Get it out of my system and go back to being the responsible wife and mom. Except, that's not what happened. It was like tasting something delicious. Now I wanted more, and who cared about the consequences? Business meetings became my convenient excuse. Mark, bless his easily fooled mind, never questioned it. But the real trick was hiding it from my actual husband. We went from coffee to lunches, then sneaking off to hotel bars just long enough to make my body hum with that electric feeling. Every notification, every stolen moment, was a surge of adrenaline and a fresh hit of crippling guilt. I became some sort of master liar, remembering what I'd told who, so my stories never contradicted. It was a strange sort of accomplishment, one that filled me with disgust even as I reveled in it. One night, Mark's hand lingered too long on my thigh under the table. I pretended not to notice, but my mind was ablaze. I knew if I didn't stop this now, who knows where it would go, but some twisted part of me didn't want to put on the brakes. This was so much more than the tired routine of my marriage, the predictability, the feeling that the best years were already behind me. Mark was asleep beside me on the couch as I scrolled through my phone. Suddenly, a message from him popped up, just a dumb joke, nothing incriminating. But the sound must have woken Mark. He mumbled something, and my blood ran cold. Quickly, I locked my phone and pretended to be asleep, heart slamming against my ribs. That was too close. I almost got caught red-handed, all because I couldn't control myself. The paranoia was eating at me. My best friend started asking questions. "You seem off lately," she'd say. I'd snap back about her always being in my business. The guilt festered, transforming into resentment. She was the one with the problem, not me. I was just having a little fun, right? Except deep down, I knew I wasn't just some innocent flirt anymore. This was spiraling out of control, and I was the one steering the car straight towards a cliff. But even knowing that, I couldn't seem to stop. The day it finally happened, I was in a daze. It wasn't a surprise. We'd flirted with the line for ages. We both knew it was only a matter of time. Still, when he said it, "I'm falling for you," my world spun on its axis. I stammered something about it being wrong, but even as the words left my mouth, I didn't mean them. The truth is, I was flattered, and I craved the intensity, the thrill, how alive it made me feel. It was insane, but that risk was like a drug, one I couldn't get enough of. We ended up in some cheap hotel that afternoon, the kind I'd only ever seen on trashy TV. Afterward, there was the guilt, the sickening feeling that I had finally crossed a line I couldn't come back from. But there was another feeling too, excitement. Things escalated quickly. Longer lunches turned into whole afternoons spent tangled up in his apartment. I'd make excuses to my husband, to my kids, anything to get away. Lies piled on top of lies, a twisted Jenga tower ready to crash at any moment. Yet I couldn't stop. It was like all the doubts and monotony of my life were washed away in those stolen moments. Mark made me feel seen, desired in a way I hadn't felt in forever. But the constant fear of being found out was suffocating. I'd wake up in a cold sweat at night, certain I'd left a message on display or said something in my sleep. I jumped at the sound of the doorbell, imagine my husband bursting in and catching us red-handed. It was starting to seep into every corner of my life. The kids, who I usually adored, became irritations, their noise and demands grating on my nerves. I'd snap at them over nothing, then feel a horrible wave of shame wash over me minutes later. I tried to hide it, but Mark would sometimes comment on it, asking if something was wrong. I brushed him off with another lie. Then came the work event, drinks with colleagues at a swanky place to celebrate some big project win. When they introduced me to the big shot guest speaker, Mark's new mentor, the one my husband talked about endlessly, I thought I was going to throw up. It felt like the entire building was swaying, and the only thing I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. Mark seemed confused, my husband oblivious. The whole night, I barely spoke, just smiled and nodded, desperate to melt into the floor. It was the ultimate betrayal, not just cheating on my husband, but lying directly to his face. On the drive home, my husband shattered away happily while I felt like I was underwater, struggling to breathe. This was wrong, all of it. But I also knew, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that it was far from over. The next few weeks were a fog of misery. Every time Mark looked at me, the image of him standing next to my husband flashed through my mind. The shame was suffocating. a thick sludge in my stomach that refused to go away. Yet, when my phone buzzed with a message from him, a jolt of excitement would cut through the guilt. It was disgusting, pathetic. I tried to break it off. "This can't continue," I texted, hands trembling. But a half an hour later, I was in his arms again, words evaporating from my mind like they were never spoken. I realized that as awful as I felt, it didn't compare to the panic I'd experience if this ended. I was completely addicted, trapped in a cycle I was too weak to break. Work was a nightmare. I avoided small talk at all costs, terrified that my guilty secret would spill out with my morning coffee. One day, I overheard a couple of gossipy interns talking. One snickered, "Heard he's messing around with some hottie from accounting." My blood ran cold. He was seeing someone else. Of course he was. What did I expect? It was like a mirror shattering, reflecting back how stupid I was. The cliché, not the exception. I wanted to cry, to scream, to confront him. But all I could do was rush to the bathroom, splash cold water on my face, and try to pretend like I wasn't crumbling into a million pieces. My sister kept saying I was acting weird. "Something's up, I can tell." She'd probe. I wanted to scream it all at her, to beg her for help, but the shame held me back. I started snapping at her, pushing her away, driving a wedge between us. I was so alone, so afraid, and there was no one to blame but myself. Mark started to change too. He was less attentive, texts coming less frequently. It should have been a relief, but my pathetic, obsessed mind screamed at me that he was with her, the younger, better version of me. I started stalking his social media, searching for clues, finding fake confidence in the snide comments I left under her selfies. I'd text him frantically, "Where are you?" or "Thinking of you." It was pathetic, and I knew it. I hated myself, hated him. But most of all, I hated that I couldn't stop. I'd sunk too far. I was the bad guy, the loser in this story that I'd written. The only question was how much worse it was going to get. I knew it was only a matter of time until it all imploded. Still, the moment it happened, it felt like a bomb had detonated. Ide guten slupi. One night, after sneaking back home way too late, I forgot to log out of our shared desktop. Mark's stupid, overly cheesy messages were laid out, plain as day, like mocking neon signs. I heard him before I saw him. A strangled cry, half sob, half enraged animal noise. Rushing into the study, I found him frozen, staring at the screen. I don't remember what I said. A jumbled mess of "I'm sorry" and "it wasn't what you think." None of it mattered. The look on his face was worse than I ever could have imagined. In those first brutal minutes, he lashed out. Not physically, but with his words. Every accusation was a jagged shard of glass ripping into me. There were tears, broken apologies. I didn't even try to defend myself. What could I even say? Then came the ice. I'd expected rage, a fiery explosion that would leave us both in ashes. Instead, he shut down. "I thought you were better than this," was all he said. A cold whisper that echoed in the room longer than any shout. He left, slamming the door behind him, leaving me alone with the wreckage of what I'd done. I don't know how long I sat there. Part of me expected him to burst back in, to scream, to break something. But there was only the hollow echo of his voice, a constant loop in my brain. He was back the next morning, his face a mask of strained calm. It was terrifying. "We need to talk," was all he said, and my gut twisted. The following hours were a blur of practical discussions and cold legalities. We talked about lawyers, temporary custody arrangements, all of it in clipped, emotionless tones. My attempts to explain, to beg for forgiveness, felt ridiculous, out of place in this sudden business transaction our marriage had become. I slept on the worn-out sofa that night, my world reduced to its harsh springs poking my back. There was no dramatic fight, no tearful breakdown. He'd already checked out, leaving me with the hollow, echoing knowledge that I destroyed everything in the most predictable, unoriginal way possible. The next few days were a waking nightmare. My parents' reaction was exactly like I'd imagined, a whirlwind of shock, anger, and bone-deep disappointment. My dad bellowed, my mom sobbed, and I just wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. My brother wouldn't even speak to me, just shot me a venomous look that said more than 1,000 words. I was a pariah. News spread through the town faster than wildfire. Trips to the grocery store were an exercise in humiliation. I could feel the stares, the judgment. Every time someone cleared their throat near me, I tensed, waiting for the inevitable. I heard. People I'd known forever, Mark's friends and their wives, vanished overnight. Every time the phone rang, it was a wave of panic. Was it just a wrong number or another person severing ties? I became a prisoner in my own home, unable to face the world outside my front door. And then the mentor bombshell dropped. Mark, in a pathetic attempt at damage control, told my husband the truth. I'd hoped that part of my betrayal could stay hidden, but of course, nothing ever stays buried forever. Mark was the younger guy my husband had been raving about, the one he'd been so excited to mentor. He'd brought me to dinners with them, made me laugh at his jokes. The layers of betrayal felt endless, and this one, for some reason, was the straw that nearly broke me. The fight was the stuff of small-town legend. Yelling, furniture crashing, and a trip to the ER for Mark to stitch up his busted lip. My husband told me through his lawyer. It was clinical, devoid of any trace of the man I'd known for half my life. The humiliation was unbearable. Our friends divided into factions, and my family retreated, embarrassed to be associated with me in any way. My husband, the betrayed saint. Mark, the sleazy villain. And me? I was the villain, but in the most pathetic, unimaginative way possible. Everyone already knew the script. There was no nuance because women like me were a dime a dozen. I didn't even get to be an interesting monster. I want a divorce. There was no yelling this time, just the empty flatness of his voice. It didn't make it any easier to hear. I tried to plead with him, to explain, but he held up a hand and said, "Don't. Just get your things and leave." My kids, who'd always run to me for a hug, now barely looked up from their screens. Avoiding my gaze felt like their own form of punishment. I packed my things in a daze, the shame burning my skin like acid. I was the bad guy, the one who shattered their world. How could I ever make it up to them? Moving in with my sister was a punch to the gut. Her pity was a bitter pill. She meant well, but her hovering brought home the fact that I was now the helpless screw-up she had to take in. The divorce proceedings started out amicable enough, but that didn't last. My lawyer, a no-nonsense bulldog of a woman, sat me down and told me to brace myself. Apparently, I needed to prepare for a fight. He was going for full custody. He had the house, the stable career, and the sympathy of the whole town. I was the cheating wife, remember? The lawyer said I'd be lucky to get visitation on weekends. That's when I broke down. Sobs racked my body as the full reality of what I'd lost sank in. And then, the rumors started. He'd apparently already moved on to someone better, a picture-perfect PDA mom who fit the narrative way more than I ever had. They painted me as the villain, the middle-aged woman desperate for attention, him as the victim. Therapy was an exercise in futility. I spent hours dissecting every stupid choice, unraveling myself, looking for the moment where I took a wrong turn. There wasn't a single moment, just 1,000 tiny cracks in who I was, in my marriage, that finally gave way. Work was another disaster. The boss found out, a mix of disapproval and sleazy fascination lingering in his eyes. The promotion I'd worked so hard for might as well have been a mirage. Everyone knew. Everyone whispered, and I became toxic to be associated with. I was the office cautionary tale, the woman you wouldn't want to leave alone with your husband. It became more than I could take. I handed in my notice and walked away, my career